Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's Substack Live with the Sustainable Media Center. So, as you know, I'm Emma Lemke, and I am so grateful and glad to be joined today by a very, very special guest and a friend, Maddie Freeman, a youth advocate, organizer, and leading voice pushing for accountability, transparency, and a healthier digital environment for young people. Maddie's the founder and the CEO of NoSo November, a digital wellness nonprofit that impacts young people around the world, and an AI fellow at the McGill University. So, today's conversation really, I think, centers around this question that we hear constantly from within our community, which is how do we move from awareness to action when it comes to social media harms, especially when we're talking about harms to young people who are growing up entirely inside these systems. And let me tell you, I could not think of any person better to have this conversation with than you yourself, Maddie. So let's talk about your experience, your life, and how you kind of got here. So you've become this powerful activist by speaking openly about your experiences and channeling that into systemic change. So, to start us off, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey. What first pushed you to step into advocacy? How did your personal experiences, shape the way you approach your work today? And was there, a moment that just really clicked for you and that's how you got here? Talk us through that kind of journey.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emma. I'm so glad to be here with you today. My story really starts, in middle school when I first got my first phone and first social media accounts. And I think looking back, that's immediately when I started experiencing harm by being on these platforms at such a young age without understanding how they actually worked and how they might affect me. But my advocacy started in 2020. It really was rooted in lived experience and seeing a need for my community. I lost many friends to suicide throughout my years of high school into college, and it started to just get so painful and difficult to manage the grief. And everyone around me in my community was struggling a lot. So I wanted to kind of advocate for some sort of mental health resource. I just didn't feel like we were getting enough support within the school system that we were attending. So I basically launched a petition asking for more mental health resources, and it was really incredible. It kind of blew up, and the school district reached out the very next day, and we started working together. And they gave me a real seat at the table to kind of initiate new initiatives to help improve youth mental health and suicide prevention within our community. And so around that time, I was really reflecting on my lived experience of like the severe depression I'd been struggling with and the anxiety and OCD I'd been dealing with since middle school, and kind of brainstorming like why that was happening and like what causes may have contributed to that. And just around that time, a bunch of people were recommending I watch the Social Dilemma documentary on Netflix. And that I would say was my real catalyst moment. I just remember watching that film and feeling such immense anger and frustration towards the companies because I didn't realize or know that their business model ran off of our attention and that they were intentionally trying to addict us to the platforms. And this just struck a chord in me, especially when they were talking about mental health research and seeing how social media had negatively impacted my generation, our generation's mental health. And so I basically launched a No Social Media November challenge in the schools that I was working with. It was piloted in a 30-person classroom, and it was just kind of a Hail Mary to try to do something about this problem. And I basically presented to the class very passionately about addictive design and how that affects young people, and left them with a challenge that was completely optional to do a detox for a month. And a lot of them, I believe like over 20 of them decided to take me up on the challenge. And it was just incredible how impactful it was. Like I was getting emails from them about how it was like completely like helping their body dysmorphia, and they felt like their anxiety had vanished within a week of the challenge. And
Mhm.
just like they were like seeing each other in person more and like doing activities that were, healthier. And it was just like so cool to hear. And I was experiencing those same effects. So I kind of was like, whoa, this actually might have like worked. Like this, I might be onto something here. But I never really expected it to actually turn into like my full-time job or like to turn it into an actual nonprofit that's, having global reach now. But it's just been like the coolest journey. And I think what's so important to me is I always try to root back into that passion that I felt, that just like deep grief and pain, just channeling that into passion and wanting to make a change. And I always make sure I'm like rooted and centered in that, and making sure that I'm everything I do with like growing the nonprofit is for the people that I lost and for the community that I built it for, and just really in touch with that because I think that's still my main important cause, I think. And so it's been just such a cool journey to see it grow and flourish ever since then.
And thank you so much for sharing that. I know that oftentimes, like I've talked, at least with my own experience and story, like through grief, through negative experiences can come such powerful outcomes, specifically in how you think about changing, the next outcome for the next person. So obviously you went through such a difficult time. You don't want anyone to have to go through that too. And it's beautiful to see that channeled into such an amazing organization and nonprofit. Is there, one story or one moment specifically with NoSo that's really stuck with you that, again, you talk about rooting yourself, but are there any stories that have really propelled you forward and wanting to continue the work?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's a lot that come to mind. I think one that immediately came to mind was I was doing a presentation at a school in Florida, and I had just finished talking. I always share my story, and then I always dive into addictive design. I think that's kind of my forte. And this young student came up to me just like crying, which happens quite often. But she was like, I am in like the darkest point of my life and I don't know what to do. And like this just felt like this huge like awakening realization of like I didn't even think about how social media might have been impacting me, and like everything you said I felt like I saw myself in it and I feel so heard. And she was just like crying and she was like, I was considering taking my own life and I feel like I have so much hope right now, and like I'm so excited to try the detox. And I actually gave her my phone number and we continued staying in touch, and she did the detox and she literally was saying like her friends were noticing changes in her, like they were
Mm,
texting her like saying she seemed like she had like some light in her suddenly, and like just that like her anxiety had improved a lot and just like all those things. And just having that conversation with her was obviously like so emotional for me because that's again where I like the pain that I built this out of is losing friends to suicide. And I myself was in a lot of points considering suicide as well, so I know exactly how she was feeling.
mhm,
And again, I know that suicide's very complex and there's so many different support systems you should tap into when that happens.
mhm,
But I think that when you examine, she realized, she was like, oh my gosh, I'm on track to spend 20 years of my life on my phone. Like that feels like a pretty glaring huge issue. And she's like, I'm spending 8 hours a day on something I don't value and my mental health is struggling. Like, what if I can shift some of that time? And that ended up being a huge, huge change for her. And so that's developed a really cool, like, professional relationship between the two of us. Like, she's looking to get more into advocacy now and tell her story. And so, yeah, that's just one that comes to mind because it always makes me so emotional when kind of like the reason I started this
mhm.
becomes kind of like evident that it's actually working in those cases. So, yeah, that one definitely warms my heart. And it was hard for me to kind of keep my composure when that happened because it was really emotional for me.
Oh, absolutely. And like I completely empathize with that. I've heard individuals through log off and through and SMC talk through, the deepest, darkest spirals that they've been in and how they really thought social media not only catalyzed that, but worsened it, like created a container where things just got so much darker and darker. And I think that oftentimes when you talk about advocacy work, you think, oh, you're building a better habit on social media or you're cleaning up your digital experience just to like spend less time, but it can be truly life-saving. Like for a lot of people, you can have such monumental shifts in the way that you think about life and yourself. And so God bless the fact that we have organizations and nonprofits like yours that provides, those moments of reflection for individuals to be able to get to that point where they feel like they have permission to take that leap. Because I do think that oftentimes you probably have heard this, people don't feel like they have the ability to build those better habits, take a step back because there's all the societal pressures and social pressures. I kind of want to pivot a little bit. I'm really interested. So you've been incredibly also effective in so many ways, but very effective at translating this lived experience into public action. What have you learned about what actually moves decision makers? And what gives you hope that your work is truly making an impact, specifically when we're talking about like you work with McGill, you work in the public sphere to some degree. What is making an impact there? Is it having young people at the table? Talk me through that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, such a full question. Also, thank you. You're so sweet. And I look up to you so much as a leader. Like you have made so much change in this world as well. So I mutually look up to you. Yeah, I mean, I think with kind of making change, it's so complicated because there's so many players. I think what I didn't realize when I started my advocacy work is just how important like kind of multi-stakeholder engagement is, and just like tapping into kind of like all of the players. Like I think I've kind of developed more robust relationships with like local governments, like other nonprofits, schools, like other youth groups, like just kind of all like funders, all of the kind of players that could make impact in the world.
Hmm.
And I think aligning those is the
Hmm.
kind of best way you can create large scale impact. And that can be really difficult. I think that's what a lot of the work I do at, McGill focuses around, because they always bring together just like an insane group of very like interdisciplinary people to talk about one topic. And it's really interesting to see, because there's always so many opinions that differ and so many like viewpoints on how things should be. But I would definitely touch on something that you mentioned. My jam really is bringing youth voices to the table. I think that's been such a, um, in the past, like something that's been so left out of any powerful decision making, or like, I don't know. I think young people are usually the ones that are most affected by these problems, especially in our kind of like industry, like digital well-being. I think young
Hmm.
people are usually like the early adopters, and they usually are like the most kind of like the most likely to be using the products, and also the most likely to not understand how the products necessarily work in terms of
Yeah.
harm and like incentive structures. And so that's why we kind of like focus a lot on education. I think just like working with the end user is kind of my like niche, and just like trying to help the young people that are like using the products, rather than, I think there's so many amazing orgs in the space that do like advocacy work. Like I always talk about like Designer for Us or like YPA or even Log Off. And I think I always partner with those orgs because it's so important to do both the work, like the top down and the bottom up. But I think just like aligning those two approaches is really important, rather than kind of like separating them. Other than that, what was the second part of your question?
I think that you answer it. I think honestly, this pivots perfectly into my second question, which is kind of talking about the McGill Fellowship and like what you've done there. So you recently engaged with the Center for Media Technology and Democracy as a part of your fellowship. You spoke alongside other SNC Next Gen board members like Zaman at Attention Govern or Be Governed convening in Montreal, right? So now, as we've seen in Australia and around the world, strides are being made to protect kids online, whether that's through age-appropriate design codes, safety by design codes, et cetera, bans, et cetera. I'm curious in talking about your public-facing work when you're working with NoSo, when you're making these partnerships, when you're talking to lawmakers, and when you're in those interdisciplinary circles. Talk us through what your, ideal governmental action to protect kids online is. Like, how do you want to see tech companies governed and regulated? What does that look like for you, having been in all these interdisciplinary conversations? I feel like you'd have such a enriched perspective.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think there's obviously no like one single correct answer, but a theme that I've seen throughout kind of, especially the convenings in Canada with more kind of policy focused people, is I feel like we're just playing whack-a-mole. I feel like we're trying to select one really niche specific harm. Like maybe it's like sexual explicit imagery, or like deep fakes,
Hmm.
or maybe it's content moderation, right?
Hmm.
Those obviously are extremely important. We need to create solutions around those. But that's not getting to the root of the problem. And so I am definitely not as well versed in policy as I am just kind of like community building, but I just feel like we need to regulate the root problem. And to me, that's the incentive structures that these companies run off of. And that's just always what I say, because I'm like, we could play whack-a-mole and like create some like content moderation thing and create some, misinformation law and create this and that. And it's like, that's going to take us 40 years to make all these laws to play whack-a-mole and all the harms. There's so many harms of tech companies.
Hmm.
All of those harms, in my opinion, stem directly from the business model, because they're incentivized not to focus on safety and the well-being of the users. They're incentivized to make profit at all costs, which leads to the
Hmm.
addictive design, which leads to all of the features that nobody wants, and all of the harms that we see, whether it's mental health or polarization or hate speech. Like all of those things obviously would exist regardless, but they're like extremely inflamed because of the business model. And
Hmm.
so I don't know what that would look like, but I think some like huge like tax incentive or something, or like, I don't know, like to tax the companies immensely if they choose that business model. Or I don't know if this, I don't think this necessarily would work, but maybe just like outright like outlaw attention for profit business model. I don't know,
Hmm.
or just even like certain types of persuasive design. I think just getting to that root could solve a lot of the problems. And also, I think a big one that I think we're getting to is just like giving users more agency. I firmly believe that if like I could really go onto my Instagram account and just like have an actual say on like how my feed looks, what kind of content I do and don't want to see, how many recommended posts I want to see versus how many friend posts I want to see, turn off certain features. Like I would actually probably use Instagram, but I unfortunately feel like I've been forced off these platforms because I am incapable of forming like a balanced relationship with them because it's really hard to find balance with something that's trying to kind of extract your time and attention from you in a manipulative way. So
Hmm.
I just wish that the platforms had more user agency. So that could be another cool kind of, I guess, law to make. The problem
Hmm.
with that is like if those features, if the ability to tweak those features wasn't immediately obvious to users, I don't think a lot of people would use them because a lot of people don't like digging in their settings and like trying to understand
Yeah.
like what they're turning on and off. So I think education is really core to that. Like what, what features are available and why should you turn it off in the first place? Like how could it affect you? And so there's a lot of variables, but I guess I'm just like it would be really cool to just kind of get to the root cause. That's kind of what I would do.
Oh, I fully agree with you. I fully agree with you. And I think to close us out, the last question is kind of extension of what you just talked about, but now asking you to dream a little bit. So, if you could wave your magic wand, your advocacy wand, what is like one design feature you would either add or you would eliminate?
Mm,
Because
that's such
I feel like you have a deep understanding of persuasive design and enough to know what is causing and triggering a lot of difficult relationships with social media.
mm. Yeah, I think I have a pretty basic answer just because I think it's kind of the base of the addictive nature of these platforms. I think either infinite scroll or
Yeah.
recommendation algorithms in general. I
Hmm.
think I vividly remember, I started kind of thinking back on the nostalgia of this. I vividly remember in like seventh grade when I was like 13, I would scroll on Instagram and see all my friends post, and then it would just end. Like there was just, I looked
Yeah.
at all of it and there was just nothing else to see. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna get off and go paint now. Like, okay.
Hmm.
And that natural stopping point just does wonders because when you try to, even if you try to set limits, like, okay, I'm gonna scroll for the next 10 minutes and then 30 minutes goes by and you're like, oh, 10 more minutes, it's fine. Like just that infinite nature of it is obviously just so addicting. And I think that's like a big one that we get into. And literally every platform has copied that
Hmm.
tactic because it's so effective. But recommendation also I think is a big one because I've noticed because I just recently got back on Instagram just to kind of like see how it was after a
Hmm.
while of being off of it. And I noticed like the amount of recommended content is so high. Like I probably see like 10% of posts are from people I actually follow, and 90% are from like recommended suggested users. And that's actually been shown in Meta's data lately that they've like drastically increased the amount of recommended content. And
Hmm.
that just like it feels a lot more like TikTok to me in like a way that feels more addictive. And I don't feel it used to feel like I'm actually going on Instagram to see what my friends and peers are doing. Now it literally just feels like I'm being like fed content and I see how hard they're trying to like get me with something and just like I don't know, try to predict exactly what would make me click. And so I feel similar on YouTube. Like I struggle a lot to have a balanced relationship with YouTube, which makes me so sad because I love YouTube and I feel like I learn a lot from videos on there and I
Hmm.
like longer form content. So it's really beneficial for me. But I think I just always get like stuck in the trap of like I watch a video intentionally that I really want to watch and then I see all these like shiny objects recommended to me of what I should watch next. And like it makes it really difficult for me to just watch that one video I intended to watch. And I always get in the loop of like, I'll just watch this next one and then this next one and next one. And yeah, those features to me, they're pretty obvious, but I think they play a big role in the addictive nature of social media, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I completely agree with you. I think it makes me laugh because I have long conversations with activists, including like reflecting myself, and it's still hard to maintain healthy relationships, even when you are a literal activist in the space and you know all about the addictive design. It's addictive for a reason. I completely agree with you. I've sensed that, Instagram used to be the place where I'd go to view my friends like birthday post, but
Yeah.
now it's there's so much recommended content that, to your point, it feels like Reels is basically just TikTok, and it's just
Yeah.
become an extension of the same exact thing, which is just an addictive platform that's sucking in its users and providing ways to connect, ways to express, ways to explore the world, but in a more so limited fashion.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just want to say thank you so much for even like your thoughtful and your engaging answers. You are truly one of my favorite activists in the space.
Mhm.
But for those who are interested in learning more about NoSo, about you and continuing to find your work, where can they find you?
Yes, you can go to nosonovember.org and look at our work. We also do have an Instagram account called NoSo November as well. And yeah, I also post, my main kind of place that I share updates is LinkedIn. So you can always friend me on LinkedIn as well. Just Maddie Freeman. We also have a NoSo LinkedIn. So those are probably more, they're probably better than our Instagram. But yeah, thank you so much, Emma. You're such a sweetheart, and it's so good to talk with you. And just yeah, I love these conversations. I feel like we could go on for hours and hours, but I appreciate you so much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we hope that you'll tune in next week. Thank you.